You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa, I am your host, and this is a show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. I'm very excited about this week's edition of New Theory Radio, as it's actually a recording from our first ever live audience show that we did this past Friday, January 24th. The show was entitled Theories on Mental Health, Stigma, Rehabilitation, and Social Responsibility. It's no secret that January is a tough month for a lot of individuals who face mental health issues, and the start of the year can not only bring colder weather and shorter days, but can also trigger feelings of sadness and self-doubt. I'm very proud of this show, as not only were we able to assemble an amazing panel that joined us. I'll actually name who those individuals are in just a few moments, but I myself, this was an opportunity for me to be open about my mental health journey as well. As I would say over the last 2 years, I've really come into my own when it comes to accepting a lot of my mental health and some of the issues that I've gone through, and being able to use a lot of the positive in my life to get through it. So very, very excited to be bringing forth this episode, and I'm again, a lot of feels from this past Friday when we recorded it. I'm very thankful for the audience that came through on a Friday night. The weather was also not the best. I think we had some really gross freezing rain. So everyone that decided to spend their Friday night with us at the Sauga 960 AM studio and be a part of this recording, I very much appreciate it. As well, I want to give a special thanks to the panel that you'll be hearing on the episode. We have New Theory alum. He's been on a few episodes. My homie Noyz, who is not only a fantastic MC, but he's also a mental health educator and supporter. My good friend Lindsay Whisen also joined us. She is the CEO of Ease Up, the organizing experts. She is also someone who is very open about her mental health journey, and I'm very excited to have had her on the show. McNeill, who is a good friend of mine, who is an awesome graphic designer and is also someone very open about her mental health journey, and I thought she'd be fantastic for the show itself. Karndeep Gill, who is a mental health advocate. She's done work with many different organizations, including Soch Mental Health, which is a fantastic mental health organization that's supporting the South Asian community here within the GTA. Last but not least, we had from Jack.org, Cheyenne Yazdapana, who is also the coordinator for Be There, which is a brand new initiative that Jack is putting out there. Jack.org is actually a fantastic charity that supports youth and their mental health journey, and enlightening the conversation and spreading more awareness amongst this demo. And we're very honored and happy to have had Jack.org be a part of this wonderful recording and initiative that we were trying to put together. Just to recap the episode itself, we definitely theorize on a lot of different topics associated with mental health. We talk about the stigma that's associated with mental health and whether or not it still exists. We also talk about coping mechanisms, so whether it's meditation, whether it's seeking therapy, whether it's using medication, what are the various ways that people are now using to cope with their mental health, and we sort of provide some theories on that. And then last but not least, we go deep into the roles that companies and institutions are now taking to promote the conversation around this issue, and really diving deep on the social responsibility aspect, which is very timely considering this Wednesday is the big Bell Let's Talk initiative. So we talk a little bit about that. Before we jump into the episode, I do want to make note that if you are someone who is dealing with anything mental health related, whether it's anxiety, depression, whether you think you're schizophrenic or bipolar, I urge you to simply just Google mental health support in Ontario. You will see a lot of great resources such as the mental health helpline. 211 Ontario is a great resource in case you're looking for information or referrals for community government and social and health services. There's also great resources for young people. So go visit jack.org, who is a great supporter, like I mentioned earlier, of this episode that we put together. Simply visit their website for more details. Kids Help Phone is a great one for anyone between the ages of 5 to 20. So that's 1-800-668-6868. They also have a live web chat. As well, I would also just start with your family doctor or simply see a doctor in general. There's a lot of great resources that are covered under OHIP. So if you are someone that lives in Ontario that's a Canadian citizen, there is a lot of great services that you can access. So I urge you to check it out. And yes, we are all in this journey together. So anyway that you need more information, feel free to also hit us up via social media. And we'll also have a list of various mental health resources within the podcast description, which will be released later in the week. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, it will be Theories on Mental Health, here live on News Talk, Sauga 960 AM.
Again, thank you everyone for joining us. So let's start with some introductions, and I'll start with the person to the left.
Hi everyone, my name is Karen. My full name is Karen Deep, but most people call me Karen. I'm a mental health advocate, public speaker. I'm currently pursuing my passions within acting and dance as well. I'm also a student at the University of Waterloo studying speech, communication, and business.
Hi, I am Lindsay Whisen, and I am the CEO of Ease Up, the Organizing Experts, which is a company that provides hands-on organizing services to people who are cluttered or disorganized. But I do have a personal experience with depression myself, a major depression, and it has a lot to do with why I organize for people.
Hi everyone, my name is Cheyenne. As we kind of mentioned earlier, I'm with jack.org. So I got involved with jack.org like a lot of young people in our network because I struggled with my mental health. And I'll kind of get into the exact details of that struggle later on when I'm sure we'll talk about that. But through my journey kind of being with jack.org, it led me to eventually being a full-time staff there. And so right now I'm the Be There coordinator for jack.org. And I do talks like this occasionally, but otherwise I, work a regular 9 to 5 and try to make a difference. So,
hey, I'm Kira McNeill, designer at Loblaws on the No Frills team. I have 2 little girls, and I've been on a mental health journey myself and figuring out what's going on and how I'm going to deal with this for the rest of my life. And so I recently found out I have bipolar 2, and It answers a lot of the questions I've had in my head as to who I am and what I'm all about. So
cool. My name is Amrit. Some of you might know me as Noyz. I'm an artist as well as I work in the mental health field in the Peel region. I've kind of over the last few years, I feel like I've been exploring or coming to grips with my own mental health journey, struggling with depression and anxiety for over 15 years. But yeah, just kind of using that experience to work in the field and give back, kind of understanding what it's like to be in that position. And also, using arts as a form of, as a tool to help cope and kind of providing youth that tool to deal with any mental health challenges they might face by facilitating hip hop and mental health workshops in high schools and middle schools, and been lucky enough to kind of take it not even in just in Peel region, but across Canada, and did one in England last year, which was really cool. So, yeah, it's been fun.
Awesome. All right, so we'll just get right into it. My first question, and anyone can take this, so feel free just to grab a mic and share your thoughts. But how would you describe that first time when you were either you woke up or you were going about your day and all of a sudden you just felt like things weren't going right? Like, what was going on at that moment, and where would you sort of describe yourself in regards to your current life when those feelings started to arise? And anyone can take this question. Don't be shy.
I mean, I can take a stab at it, and it's a hard question, but I think for me, it was a very much like a looking back kind of thing until I realized how bad like the struggle really was. I know that when I first kind of really classified my struggles, definitely in the kind of like grade 12, going to post-secondary kind of transition year, which I know causes a lot of young people to struggle. But looking back, I recognized that like even as a kid of like 8 years old, there was definitely things that I was dealing with that at the time I thought were just completely normal. And I guess that's the thing, is that when you're going through those things, you kind of assume that everyone else is going through something similar, and you don't know it's like a really bad thing until the point where it hits you and you're just like, wow, I can't, get out of bed, or I can't like bother to do the things that I need to do. So yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, like anxiety, I think, was something I struggled with for a long part of my life. And I remember like the weirdest things of like, I would walk into an elevator, and if my sister was like putting her earrings on while we were walking in, I was worried that her earring would fall through the elevator shaft, and like that would bring me anxiety. Wow. And like, it's like a plastic earring. It's not even like a big deal, but weird things like that. And so yeah, I think especially during that transition from high school to university is when it got really bad, dealing with a bunch of different things that were kind of going on in my life. And eventually it kind of got to the point where I didn't really care about a lot of things, where there's like friendships, family, or even my life. And so I was able to finally, we were talking about Lindsay earlier, you kind of just hit a point where you're just like, well, I might as well just try getting help. Like, what's the worst that can happen? It's not like it can get any worse. And so I did. And then as I started getting help, I think only thereafter was when I was able to actually see like, wow, that really wasn't normal. Like what I was feeling is an illness, and it's not something that like everyone's going through, and everyone's just like, oh, you got some bad days, suck it up, like we all have them. It's like, no, some people genuinely have things that they have no control over, and their brains are working in a way that causes them to feel a lot worse things than most people would. And so yeah, I think it was very much like a looking back kind of thing. I don't think I really realized it in the moment, but it took a while. It was a very long journey for me too.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Didn't mean to look at you.
No, it's okay. I think I started going back to school in college when I was 25, and at that point I was already like a married mother of two and had a whole bunch of stuff going on, and all things that I thought were just very difficult, normal things, and I was having a hard time dealing with it. But I started becoming like really cognizant of the journey I was on, and it's like realizing that as hard as I try to take care of these feelings that I'm having inside of myself and whatever, like there's just some things you can't make better on your own. And I am like such a go-getter. Like I am so driven to make things happen, and I just couldn't make that happen. And that's when I knew I really needed help, like in a big way.
Yeah, and that's what I find fascinating about both of your stories, is just the idea of finally accepting that things aren't okay and actually seeking help, because and this is kind of me speaking on sort of my perspective growing up. When you think about seeking help right away, the being fans of superheroes, you think about Arkham Asylum and like Batman, right? You think about you're going to have to be in a straitjacket. Like it's very intimidating to be like, I don't feel right and I have to go talk to somebody about it. Did the both of you ever have any type of hesitation around actually talking to somebody about what's going on in your mind? Because I know when I first did that, I was a little scared to open up, because I was like, man, what if I have a deeper problem, or what if what I'm saying actually scares people, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think growing up I didn't care too much what other people thought, at least more than like the average kid did. But like when it comes to stuff like that, I think everyone's terrified, especially when you're like, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 years old. Like you're so worried about how my life is going to change. And like, not only is there what my friends going to think, you have to get over the cultural issues of like, what do my parents think, like how do I even tell them what I'm going through? So absolutely. Straitjackets were one thing I thought. I thought like the classic, like you're going to go to a psychologist's office and lie down on the couch and they're going to be like, tell me about your life starting from like 3 years old. So like, it was just something that I wasn't ready for. And I think even, thinking back to my friends, like there's so many times where I knew like I wanted to tell them, but I didn't think they would understand at all. So absolutely, I think it was a huge amount of like fear of what is everyone going to think if I tell anyone.
Yeah. Lindsay, how would you describe your journey that led you to depression, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I don't at all. Nothing tremendously bad happened to me when I was younger, thank goodness. But but my parents were silent. They didn't say anything bad, but they didn't say anything good. And just my particular biology, my brain always just focused on the negative. Well, if they're not saying anything positive, it must mean I'm failing, or it must mean that I'm not good enough. So depression for me, it was like just a tiny seed that planted, and it creeps up on you. Like, you don't know what's going on. It's your thoughts, it's your mind. So it feels like who you are. How can my thoughts be sick? Aren't my thoughts who I am? So it wasn't until, oh my goodness, I remember my partner coming home from work one day, and I was rock bottom, and I had thoughts of ending my own life, nothing planful, but the one thing that I could not reconcile was that, oh man, if I do something like that, he's going to have to find me, and I love him, and so I'm going to tell him first. So he came home from work, and I was like, look, Graham, I don't want to live anymore. Like, I'm just tired of feeling like I suck. I'm tired of not having any joy or any happiness. Yeah. And we had no experience of mental health, nothing. And Graham got on the internet after I went to bed that night and just started Googling. And the next day he was like, Lindsay, I think you have depression. And I was like, what? What's that? Like, okay. And he was like, and he was my superhero, because he was like, we're taking you to the doctors. We're going to take you to the psychologist. We're going to go where we need to go right away. Yeah. And I was just like, so it's not something that I could catch early onset. I was oblivious to it. There was no difference. It was just me. And I know when my doctor diagnosed me, I got worse before I got better. Really? Because I thought, no, I just suck. Like, depression isn't a real thing. He's just being nice to me. Mm-hmm. Or it just, the own internalized stigma that I had against myself was so strong that I was like, this is proving that I suck. I have this disease that you just give to people who suck. Yeah. That's the label you give them. Yeah. And I'm in that group, and I'm uninterested in being in this group. Mm-hmm. But thank goodness I had a loving partner to live for. Mm-hmm. And I held on and took the medication and started, the talk therapy and all of that stuff. And life is joyful now, like there's a happy ending. So,
well, even like the time that I've known you, like it seems that your business idea kind of came out of your sort of depressive state, and things have been on the up and up now.
Yes, totally. So we organize for people. My company attracts people who love to organize for people. And my desire and skill at organizing totally came out of me because it was a coping mechanism. You guys will all know that in your minds, it becomes a very dark, negative, stressful, hopeless place. And the only coping mechanism that I just invented for myself was like, well, at least my physical life can be really simple, and I can reduce my time, my sanity, the amount of energy that I put into getting dressed in the morning or doing anything. Like, it was just like, I've got to live super efficiently and in an energetically modest way in my physical life, because my mental life is so energetically draining and exhausting and life-threatening.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And I'm glad that you were able to take that and use it as motivation to kind of get things going. Cardi, when I'm reading your bio, you were actually diagnosed as a schizophrenic, right?
Yeah, so for a long time I thought I had bipolar disorder. Okay. And I started seeing a new psychiatrist since my old psychiatrist, he resigned from his position. And she tells me, in your file, it says you have schizoaffective disorder, which is combined symptoms of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And in my head, I thought, I never knew about this. Why didn't anyone tell me? So I think what's different now with this psychiatrist specifically, she asks me, what do you know about your diagnosis? Because for so many years, I honestly didn't know what I had. It was just an array of symptoms, from like being said that I have ADHD to OCD to the same thing with depression. And schizoaffective, like you said, having bipolar, and it brought so many answers to you. Having schizoaffective just filled in all those blanks, because I was being manic, and then I had depressive symptoms, but then in addition to that, I had extreme paranoia and hallucinations and delusions. So it just didn't add up to me until she said that. It was such a relief. Yeah.
How did you, and I want to take something, Lindsay, that you said about how your parents growing up were kind of indifferent when it came to just the things that you were doing, and I kind of harken that a little bit to just the perception of mental health amongst like ethnic communities, right? Like you grow up, everyone has this notion of like a crazy uncle or a crazy aunt, and like you don't talk to this person, or you let this person kind of do their own thing because they're not fully there, and people just kind of going about their days and don't acknowledge it. And I know as someone who's grown up in an immigrant household, it's tough. Like it's tough to take a step back and be like, I think something's not right with me, but then you also fear what your parents might label you as, or just how they perceive it. Maybe Noyz will ask you, like, how you said you mentioned that you've been dealing with depression for about 15 years. Did you hide it from your parents initially, and were you ever concerned about kind of letting them know what you were going through?
I hid it from everybody for a long time, to be honest. And I think part of it was because I didn't have the awareness or the vocabulary to really understand or to put a title on. Like, for example, you were saying, like, once you had that diagnosis, it kind of made a lot of things fall in place. But I feel like because I didn't have those words, I was just kind of going through it every day. And it's like, I don't know what this is, but this is just kind of the new normal now. Right? So, and yeah, it becomes normalized, and you don't necessarily think it's something wrong. It's just, this is reality now, right? Yeah. So you just kind of learn to live with it and learn to adapt with it. So for that reason, I didn't really share it with anybody. And partially too was because just the mentality around it was, I felt like at home it wouldn't have been very open or welcoming to it. Because I remember, like, anytime I would talk to my parents about work or about school, if I was struggling with, with those things, then the feedback that I always got from them was kind of like, well, you just learn to figure it out.
Yeah.
And because that was what they had to do. Coming from Punjab, coming to Canada, they didn't have that privilege to actually slow down and say, hey, I'm not doing so good. Because they had to do what they had to do to, work 2 jobs, to pick up the kid from the babysitter here, go run to the job over there. It was just constant movement. And there wasn't actually an opportunity to stop and say, okay, how am I actually feeling? And for example, I know my mom struggles with anxiety, but she's never actually got help for it or talked to anybody about it. So a lot of it is, just that lack of awareness and that lack of vocabulary. And a lot of it also comes from just that mentality of, okay, we've left home behind now. We've got to create something new for ourselves. So we just got to keep going. You just got to keep moving.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I feel like even in my family, there's a lot of misdiagnosed people in regards to what they're actually going through versus what a doctor may say or what a family member might say. And it's unfortunate as you kind of grow older and you educate yourself, you're like, no, like it's more like this, because physically they're all there, but mentally something's wrong. I know, not necessarily in my family per se, but I know in other families, like, there's also a fear to almost acknowledge it because you're worried about what people are going to think. Yeah,
that's a big part of it too. I can only speak for like South Asian culture, but there is that very big, how will other people perceive us when things happen? And like we've talked about it on Immigrant Hustle too, where it's kind of like we are a very collectivist culture, but when it comes to matters of mental health or alcoholism or addiction, things like that, we tend to isolate that person and shun them out. So we kind of, go against everything that is in our nature in the way that we, come together as a household or as a family. So growing up, we saw that. Like I had uncles that would drink a lot, and, the whole thing was like, okay, that guy's doing his thing. Nobody talked to him, like you were saying before, right? Nobody talks to him, nobody interact with him. So we kind of create that culture where it becomes impossible to seek help now.
Yeah.
Right? Because you become isolated by the people that are closest to you.
Yeah.
When really those uncles are just like coping, right? Like there was mental health going on
Literally.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, it's the reality of it, right?
Yeah, like for example, I was talking to an uncle of mine last year. He doesn't drink anymore, but he used to back in the day, and he was telling me about when he first came to Canada. He was the first one from my family to come, and he came in 1970, and he was working hard, like very physical labor jobs. He was working 14 hours a day, and he would just get to the point where he needed something to help him go to sleep so that he could get up to go to work again the next day. So he would work 14 hours, take the bus 2 hours, go home, drink until he fell asleep, and then so he could wake up the next day to go back to work early again. So you kind of get caught in this cycle. So a lot of it is circumstantial, and a lot of it too is like he didn't have the support system around him to even recognize that because he was the first one here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into it when we're talking about like immigration and mental health, or just ethnic households and mental health as well.
Totally. And then, Carney, just a question for you, and let me know if this is too personal, but did you ever share your diagnosis with your family, and was there any fear around that?
So I started experiencing symptoms of mental health, mental illness issues when I was 15. And I would say the situation happened gradually, but very quickly. And sharing it with my mom she could see that I wasn't getting out of bed and I wasn't eating, and it took me a lot of effort to even go in the shower. So she knew something was wrong, but we never put a label on it. We never says because exactly like what other people are going to think and such. But my dad, for example, he struggled with depression, psychosis, and paranoia, all those kind of areas, but we never talked about it in my family.
Yeah.
Me and my siblings saw it firsthand. And I guess seeing him go through it kind of made sense why I went through it. But my mom would just say to everyone, if I was hospitalized, oh, she's sick, or something's wrong with this, more of a physical problem than it was a mental problem. And because if she said it was mental related, their common answer would be she's attention seeking, nothing's wrong with her. So that brought me down even more, because I'm do you really think I would want to go through this? I wouldn't wish this upon anyone else in my life.
There are better ways to get attention.
Yeah, there's way better. Yeah, so.
We can talk about mental health being on trend in a later segment.
Yeah, so sharing that diagnosis with my family was really hard. So I recently got diagnosed with schizoaffective, like I said, and I just shared it with my brother and sister. So they were kind of confused on the idea. My brother's very relative with mental health since he's been through depression. But with my sister, I have to specifically say the symptoms. It's really, the internet's really cool in a way where you can exactly see the symptoms, examples of delusions or catatonic episodes where you can't move your body. So it says in a way that it's real, right? But yeah, other than that, sharing my symptoms, my mom's always been supportive. When I was 15, it was harder, but I think as the years went on, she saw me in a good place. She knew when I can be in a good place, and then she saw me relapse. So I think relapse is the hardest part, because you think to yourself, I'm in this place again. How can I be in this place again? Your family members are going to be she's hospitalized again. That doesn't make any sense. Again, with attention seeking and just the symptoms of the diagnosis in itself. Yeah.
No, thanks for sharing that. I think that's very important. Have you, and this is an open question, have any of you started to embrace it? Have any of you kind of decided, you know what, I go through it and I'm just gonna continue? And a couple of you that I see on social media actually embrace it in many different ways. But when did you start to get comfortable with embracing it? When was it you know what, this just happens and I'm just going to own it, and this is going to be my way to cope? And maybe Kira, let's begin with you.
I think I started to embrace it when I realized it wasn't all negatives. Bipolar 2 is not is not just dark and scary. I've actually been going through like a hypomanic episode for the last 3 to 4 days, and literally like my house is cleaner than it's ever been right now. My house is clean. My wallet was cleaned out. My purse is cleaned out. I got through 7 loads of laundry, which that's a very normal thing of depression.
Did you hire Lindsay? Is that what you did?
No, I didn't. I just like was that superwoman, but also I haven't slept more than like 2 to 3 hours a day for the last few days. Like I am up exercising in the middle of the night because I can't slow my brain down, and I'm really hard on myself. Like I'm going on vacation soon, so like I gotta look really good in my bathing suit, and like I'm so stressed out about that, and it's just, you know, ruminating thoughts. It gets you to a place. But anyways, like my work as a designer, I am an amazing ideator. I can fill a chalkboard in like 5 minutes for you with brand new ideas. Like my brain just goes to places that other people's it doesn't go there. Mm-hmm. And it can be a little frustrating sometimes. I get a little irritable sometimes when people can't like stay at that level with me. Like, oh, how do you not get that this is such an amazing idea? Like, aren't you in here with me right now? And I don't know, there's a lot of benefits to it. Definitely hard parts, but there's a lot of reasons why I am so different than everyone else, and I've learned to embrace that.
Yeah, like one of the things, and you know, love him or hate him, like Kanye's been one guy that's embraced it and actually said, hey, my mental health is my superpower. Mm-hmm. Like he really promotes that, and you know, he's obviously someone that's been struggling, like it's been pretty obvious, but you know, I think that statement always kind of resonated with me, because I'm like, hey, he's owning it. Like he's not hiding from the fact that when he's doing weird interviews and he's just lashing out and supporting Trump, like there's an issue there. Cheyenne, you've obviously embraced it in a different way through your work now with Jack and Be There.
Yeah.
When did you decide, hey, I need to start not only owning up to this, but now like I think I'm in a position where I can help other people?
Yeah, so I mean, it was really interesting for me of like when I hit that point of like getting help. Because I think, you know, a lot of people also view getting help as like, oh, you're going to see a therapist, like everything's great now for you, you know? But like for me, I think it was probably like, I want to say like spring when I went and saw a counselor for the first time, you know, like 4 years ago. And, you know, I went initially, and I think it kind of got me on the right track. But I think like, you know, a few people have mentioned already, like the internet was a big thing for us of like Googling things and like kind of researching there. And so I started doing that a bit more. And when I came across what Jack Dorg is doing, I think I was still on my road to recovery, but I heard about it. And similarly to, you know, actually getting help, I was like, well, you know, like it's not going to get any worse. Like I might as well kind of like read about what's going on. And the more I kind of looked into it, the more I realized that, you know, as a young person, we, you know, learn about like health, you know, physical health. We learn about like sex, all these things in school, and we talk about it with our parents. But like mental health is something that I literally did not know about till Google. And if I hadn't, you know, if Google wasn't around, I probably still wouldn't know some of the things I know right now about mental health. So kind of that mission of Jack Dorg really resonated with me. And so of like, you know, actually educating other young people. And I think when I started, because I was already in that still kind of like, you know, pardon my language, but like fuck everything kind of phase, like, I don't know, might as well try things out. Like,
we'll totally edit that out. It's fine.
I just like, you know, was willing to just like put myself out there and like really, you know, not care about what the results were, because like I knew that I was going towards something that I thought was where I should be, and I thought that young people should be able to kind of talk about those things. And I think specifically for me, I was lucky because I was surrounded by a lot of people that kind of supported that at first, at least, you know, small circle. It's gradually gotten bigger, but definitely it was a small circle at first, but it was a big enough circle that it really empowered me to kind of continue that. And yeah, to this day, I think through things I've been able to do with Jack and just in general, it's reinforced to me that like, no, like I wasn't making a mistake by telling people about what I was going through, and I wasn't, you know, like it was interesting when we were talking about like our parents and stuff. Like I think my parents, when I first kind of was struggling with things, very, very against it, very like hide what you're going through, all that kind of stuff. But then once they were able to see what I was able to kind of like do with it, I think then they were like, oh, like maybe this is gonna be good for you. Maybe you'll get a job out of this one day. And I think like that kind of got them to be more warmed up to it, and like to the point where it is now, where like I think my parents, you know, had so many issues with it earlier on, but like now are so much more comfortable with it. So yeah, I think it always just kind of was something where I knew it was where I had to go, and it was tough, but like I had enough people who were willing to kind of encourage me to really, you know, go in that direction.
Awesome. I think that's a great segue to, actually, before we jump into the rehabilitation part, because we've broken this out to stigma, rehabilitation, and social responsibility. Just one last question, and anyone can take it, is as of today, January 24th, 2020, as we're recording this, do you feel like a stigma still exists on mental health? And anybody can take this.
Yeah, for example, we talked a little bit about, you know, Bell Let's Talk. I feel like a lot of their campaign focuses on like the quote unquote easier to understand diagnoses, so like depression, anxiety, but you don't necessarily see somebody talking about schizophrenia or talking about bipolar disorder or, you know, the quote unquote like the scarier ones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I feel like even within a campaign like that is designed to promote mental health and conversation around it, there's still some aspects of it that they're not really promoting at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
I know one real quick thing is like at Jack.org we actually like just do some surveys sometimes, and we found that like, you know, especially you'd think young people are probably really okay with it, especially like with all the conversations, you'd think that everything's fine, but we found that I think it's 94% of people said that they wouldn't judge someone else if they had a mental health disorder, but 40% thought that their friends would. So there's clearly this huge disparity of people who like think that, like, you know, I, for example, would be like, I'd never judge someone else, but still, like, sometimes I'm like, yeah, that friend, maybe I wouldn't tell him because maybe they judge me. But clearly, you know, the numbers don't show that. But I think there's a huge amount of self stigma that still exists.
Totally.
On top of like that stigma that still exists, especially for like, you know, some of those, you know, quote unquote, again, like scarier mental illnesses. And yeah, I think that, you know, young people still, the generation that should be the most comfortable with it, still really isn't.
That's so cool.
I just wanted to add with that. I completely agree. Like, for me, myself, I overthink it and exactly think that stigma is there amongst people, that they're going to think I'm a scary person or I'm dangerous, even with my family. So if I'm having hallucinations or I'm hearing voices at night, I avoid to tell my mom because I don't want to scare her. I don't want her to think she has this child that thinks this way or has these scary things that are going on in her life. And I always say to myself now, I say, you think it's scary to you? Think how scary it is for me going through it itself, right?
Alone.
So, yeah,
Right.
alone, exactly.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I was going to add to that, we spend a lot of time making everyone around us comfortable with our illness, and it's not helpful.
Yeah, and
We're
I'm
trying
glad,
to fix ourselves.
and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that ends up adding more stress to it, where it's like now,
100%.
like I think, Lindsay, you alluded to it, where it's when you're being diagnosed, all of a sudden you're like, now everybody around me needs to take special treatment, and now like I'm a burden to people, and there's that worry, right? That adds to it. Like, I think it's very easy to feel bad for your loved ones.
Totally. Actually, you probably all know this experience when you share it with someone who gets it, and then you compare that to sharing it with someone who doesn't get it. And it's just
totally.
like, oh man, like that's going to take me down 3 notches because the way they looked at me, I know they don't get it. And it just reintroduces all that noise to yourself.
Yeah.
I share that I have a history with depression very easily, and people are always like, thank you so much, that's so brave. And I'm like, okay, so first of all, practice it. Like, the more you say it out loud, the easier it gets. But there's also a relationship. I think the more you are ashamed of it, shame is involved. That if I think that depression is a legit disease that is outside of me, there's no shame in saying that I have it, right? Whereas, and so what I'm trying to say is just that stigma is very related to how legitimate you respect the disease to be. Like, if you think it's silliness, then you're not going to tell anybody. You're going to be ashamed of it. But if you, like, no, the research is in. Like, start reading some medical documents. It's legit. And so I can say I have this with zero shame.
Awesome. No, thanks for mentioning that. Moving on to the rehabilitation part of this episode. How do you cope with your mental health? Like, what do you do? And honestly, if it's illegal. You don't have to share it. Or you can. We can bleep it out. Stuff's kind of legal now.
Steal a lot of cars.
Yeah.
But very helpful.
No, and I asked that because I heard Google, I heard seeing somebody, and yeah, like I'm just curious. I want to know. Like it's yeah.
Let's share our tools. Come on.
I admittedly I've been seeing a psychiatrist like for the last 6 months, and she's become like one of my homies now, and it's cool. Like it's cool to see the resources that OHIP has, right? And I saw her at a peak part where like things are just moving too fast, and I was like, whoa, I need to slow down. And like it's the one meeting a month that I look forward to because like she's become like a friend now, which is kind of cool. And she's like young and relatable, and yeah, like it's kind of nice. And it's interesting when you're married because you always assume that your life partner can be the person you speak to, and it's no disrespect to my wife, like I tell her everything, but then I also like it feels good to talk to somebody that doesn't know you, right?
It's not their job to take.
It's not. It's not. No.
And there are expert things that she knows.
Yeah.
You know, like she's been schooled in this, right? Like it's important.
Exactly. Anybody want to share?
Yeah.
Kira.
So first off, I just want to say that like the best way that you can get through any mental illness is by maintaining hope. So when you maintain the hope, if you lose the hope, that's when things get super scary. And the best way to keep the hope is to literally fill like as cliche and as it sounds, like fill yourself with positive thoughts and reinforcements. Wake up in the morning, think about the affirmations of the day, literally think about what it is you want to happen, keep that positive thinking in your head. And throughout the day, I find the more grateful that I am to everyone around me. And it just changes everything. Like a weird way to say this would be like in a morning, like I might not be able to pull myself out of bed, but if I know that someone I love or just even someone random, they really need help, I can get myself out of bed to help that person out, even if I can't do it for myself. So like just always pushing forward in a positive, grateful way, that is the number one. And also kitty snuggles and a little bit of cannabis.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that now. Anybody else want to share how they cope?
I think just like speaking from the perspective of somebody in the arts, it can get really tough when you're known for one particular medium or one form of expression, because then sometimes your work can become stressful, and that can kind of like feed into being unwell. So I found lately it's been important for me to have other hobbies that are not for public release or for public consumption. I have my music and all that stuff, which is for release, but then other stuff, which is just for me. So like I used to draw a lot when I was a kid, but stopped drawing, started doing a lot more music, but now I'm like, hey man, I miss drawing. It's just like a simple thing that you can do for yourself. And just kind of having those things that are just for you. I feel like that's super helpful when everything else I create is not just for me anymore.
Yeah. Awesome.
Just to add to that, I think some of my coping strategies would be specifically music and movies, probably ones that I can relate to. So one of my favorite movies is called, it's kind of a funny story where a gentleman goes into a psychiatric unit, experiences his life in depression, and states how it was a life-changing experience in itself. I usually watch that movie when I'm depressed because it, like you said, it gives me hope. And with the music part, some lyrics just touch you in a way like no other. And also, sometimes this doesn't come to your head, but like if you don't have someone in your life who can just be there, that's okay. I call a helpline and just express it. And even if they don't say what I want to hear, that's okay. I talk to someone. And if that helpline doesn't work, I call another one. Like it's an endless amount of opportunities where you can be okay at the end of the day.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
One thing I was just gonna add is like I feel like what I've done for coping has changed so much, like from when I like was in probably like peak struggle to like now. And one thing I love what you said, actually, well, both of what you said about like the kind of like hope element, but also like movies. Like I know that
inspiration.
Like that inspiration. Like when I was at like the height of how much I would struggle, it's kind of like embarrassing to look back and say it now. But like it was almost like I would look for like anything that was kind of pointing me to the right direction that would give me that hope. And so I remember like I think twice saw like the number like 222 a lot, and then I was like, what if this means something? And like I Googled it, and it was something like, if you see this, I don't know, like it was probably one of those like weird like whatever kind of websites, and it was like, oh yeah, like if you see the number 222, it means you're onto something big. And I was like, oh, and like I started seeing it everywhere. Like I'm like, it's 222 again.
This makes me feel good.
Yeah, and like that was a huge thing for me. And like I remember also like movie I love to watch, kind of Shawshank Redemption. I think very different. It wasn't in prison or anything, but like the whole like thing of hope, the struggle and overcoming it, and like really being able to see literally the light at the end of the tunnel, I think was the thing for me. And like that was kind of again peak, but like now it's very different. Like I see a counselor, like I talk to someone about it. I have people in my life I can talk to about it, and like very important note of like not always overburdening people in my life about it, like having the kind of times where it's something I can just kind of vent to a friend about, and having times where it's like, okay, I'm gonna save this for my counselor who gets paid, and actually deal with it with them. But like occasionally going back and like every once in a while I'll watch Shawshank again and just like kind of remember the things that got me through the tougher times. And I think it really just changes depending on what's going on.
Awesome.
No one said medication. I take medication. I have since before both of my kids were born. And I've tried to come off of it on 2 occasions. And when you're an entrepreneur, like life is stressful and it feels risky and you always feel like you're failing. But I would be in a period where things were going better, and I decided to come off it once. And my partner, he could sort of like, I'd be off it for a while, and he was like, Linz, like your thoughts are getting darker. You are magnifying the negative. You are discounting all the positive. And we could see that like, wow, the medication like actually makes a difference for how my thoughts pop into my head. So I went back on it. Like, let's go back on it. Now is not the time. And I've been in remission for a very long time, and I still see my psychologist regularly. Like, we always think that there needs to be a 5-alarm fire where like the house is burning down, and that's when you need to like all the fire trucks from 5 different, departments come to save you. When it's like, man, I'm no longer rehabilitating, I am educating, and I'm growing. And I remember my psychologist said to me at one point, he was like, Linz, like you're good, you can stop coming. And I said, well, if I keep coming, like will I just get stronger? And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, well, then I'll see you again. I'm doing things that I would have never thought I would be doing.
I'm actually very happy you mentioned that, because there is like a stigma around medication. And I remember when I was dealing with my stuff, I had buddies that smoke a lot of weed, and they were like, try different strains. Like, this is what I use. But marijuana was what actually led to my anxiety. Like, I had a really bad marijuana trip in first year university, and that like pretty much like for my second semester, like I was a wreck. Like, my girlfriend at the time was like, you're not good, like you're not doing anything, like it looks like you're like sat at the bar when we're all having fun. And I thought about it last year. Like, I thought about reintroducing marijuana back into my life, and it wasn't until I talked to somebody about it that we're like, well, if you had an adverse effect once, it could probably happen again. So I haven't really smoked up as much as I'd love to, but I don't. It's legal, I can say that.
And practice helps, actually.
But I have friends that openly, whether it's medication that's prescribed or openly just, hey, they need that spliff in the morning, they need that one blunt in the morning just to get them going, or to
sleep.
They need that sleep, they need that cigarette just to kind of loosen up. And at one point, do you just you got to let them do them, right? Like,
totally.
That's what it takes. That's what it takes.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know, unless you see other symptoms of abuse, but I don't know.
No, my psychologist said it. He pointed out to me that like depression works in such a way that it doesn't even sometimes give you a chance to do the right thing, because it just comes in negative right off the bat. Like, you don't even have a fighting chance. So why, if a medication helps remove that dark cloud from over my head so that I have a fighting chance before hopeless thoughts come in, why wouldn't I?
Absolutely.
To add on to that, so explaining to my family the brain chemistry and mental illness along those sides, my mom now says to me, when you're not on your medication, you're not you're your illness. So I think that's one thing that I carry along, because I've tried multiple times getting off my medication, and I'm not the person I was destined to be, for sure. Yeah. Just wanted to.
No, it's good to provide that context for sure. Another way people are medicating are apps. So you have apps like Calm, Headspace. What are your thoughts around sort of new innovation in the coping space? I know that mental health is also linked to this device too. Like, it's very easy to, late at night, just scroll and see things and have, fear of missing out or just feeling like, hey, I should be there, or why am I not like this, and kind of always compare yourself. But like, how do we feel around the table about technological advancements in coping? And have any of you ever tried any of these apps? Like, I have them on my phone, but I haven't looked at them yet.
I actually use Calm. Like, not as often as I'd like to, but like, I have it on my phone, and I found that with not just like these kinds of apps, but just technology in general, as humans, I think we'll be able to take something amazing and turn it into something trash, and also take something that's like garbage and then also make something really good out of it. And I think that it really depends on how it's kind of being used and how society views it. Like, for example, the way I use Calm is like on a day that I'm feeling generally okay, but like I just want to make sure that like, maybe it was really busy, or like maybe today, I've had a pretty long day at work and I'm doing this after and like I'm loving it, but maybe I just want to, when I go home, like kind of just have a breather and just like relax. And so I'd use it in a situation like that. But what I don't think should happen is for companies like this and also their users to be like, oh, you know what? You thought you wanted to kill yourself? It's fine. Just like use this app. Like, trust me, everything's gonna be great. Like, I use it all the time after yoga and it's perfect. Like, like that kind of attitude of like, oh, like let's minimize it and minimize medication or other kinds of things and use these as a replacement. I think it's just like the fine line of navigating that. Yeah. But I think like, that's up to us as consumers of how we view it. So I think having more tools, my opinion at least, is it's always better to have more and then use it, like in the right way, rather than not have those things when it could really help a certain person. But it really, at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to like how we're viewing them and how we're using them. I mean, there is also like discussion of like how these companies are advertising it. Like, I don't think, there could be a very unethical kind of conniving way of how they go about it. So far, I haven't seen too much of that, but like, it's something to also keep in mind.
It definitely is fascinating, because if you, like, I get fed Calm ads all the time, and like, they're like, oh, LeBron James uses Calm. Yeah. And it's like, well, LeBron James must be stressed out. So if it works for him, it'll work for me, right? Yeah. Like that, those are the ads that you see. Yeah. And you're like, okay, cool. But just another question on that is, how many of you have like turned to like spirituality or religion? Like, I sometimes like I go to the Gurdwara and just like sit there and just kind of zone out, right? Never was religious, but it just feels good to kind of hear the prayers and just kind of meditate a little bit. Have any of you ever done that? Like, have you ever turned to spiritualness or religion? And the answer is no, it's fine. Yeah.
I feel like I have in the last year or so. I'm just kind of understanding the parallels between different philosophies and how they use meditation. Yeah. So I've been reading about like obviously meditation within Sikhi, but also within Taoism, within Buddhism, and kind of like looking at the parallels between them all.
They overlap.
Yes.
A lot more than they are different.
Very much so. Yeah. So I definitely find it to be very effective, and I feel like mindfulness practices, a lot of them is based on like Eastern philosophy. Yeah. So I feel like that's been a source that I've gone to just recently, as far as trying to, like you said, just have more in your toolbox to turn to. Yeah.
And leave it up to the discretion of the person. Like, if something is therapeutic to you, If something is not therapeutic to you, it doesn't mean that it isn't for other people. Like, and there have been things that I use at one point that are therapeutic, and then they go sour, and I gotta, you've got to adapt and pivot and find out the things that like serve you as you change and you grow. Asking for help and calling a friend, like that's more challenging to me than it is to open an app on my phone, but the reward is also greater. So it's like the more difficult of a thing you do sometimes, the greater payoff you can get to. But you do what you can. Like, honestly, do whatever you can that is therapeutic, and don't judge yourself.
Cardi.
I think for me, like, growing up in religion and such, this having the sole purpose being praying. So for example, I'm going through something and a family member will be like, oh, you don't pray enough, or just pray, or just read.
Oh yeah, pray it away.
So I think that kind of areas, I'm not for that kind of area, but a religion, like, it's not excessive for me, but it's to the point where I find hope within it.
Cool.
So my dad passed away 2 years ago, and I think the spirituality within that is he's looking over me, and I always feel like he's going to make sure I'm okay. So I feel like praying and just having that hope and faith, it kind of helps me to keep going and take everything one day at a time.
Yeah, it's therapeutic.
Absolutely.
Has anyone ever gone to you for help?
It's kind of my job. Yeah, so a lot of people do. Yeah, I think the scary thing about it too, sometimes, like working in the mental health field, is it feels like it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
You kind of feel like, oh crap, I'm responsible now to support this person.
Save people.
Yeah, what do I say? What do I do? Like, I don't have this within me to do this. But one thing that, when I first got into the field, a colleague of mine kind of shared with me, which really was helpful. And she said that you as the worker shouldn't be working harder than the person you're trying to support. And I think that goes down to the core of rehabilitation in itself, is that, you know, it is important to have your social circle, but really it's up to you to take the initiative to do the work. And a lot of therapy, like, I don't know if anybody's done like CBT or stuff like that, but a lot of that is you sitting with yourself and asking yourself difficult questions.
Yeah.
And writing down and seeing what you can come up with. So yeah, working in the field, when people come to you for help, it's important to understand that there's only so much you can do as a worker, and it's up to the person you're trying to support to meet you halfway or more than halfway, because you need them to have that hope to be, you know, in a capacity or in a state where they're willing to actually fight for themselves.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing is when myself as a worker, I'm trying to do everything I can to support somebody, but they're not in a position to support themselves yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it's happened to me in a few different capacities. Like when I, you know, used to do talks more with like high schools, a lot of times after the talk, we'd be around if anyone wants to come ask us questions. And most of the time it's like how you can get involved, but sometimes they'll come and like, I would say like probably like 3 out of 5 times they would come and be like, hey, you know, thanks for sharing. Like I'm also going through like blah, blah, blah. What do I do? Right. And it's tricky. And like we get the training of like how to kind of handle that. But yeah, like a lot of times people will say that. And, you know, like we were saying, like you have to kind of recognize your own limits in that conversation of like, I am not a trained anything really. I can't tell you, you know, what to do in your situation. I'm only getting this like 20-second snippet of what you're sharing with me. But I think it also, you know, as someone who is more comfortable with mental health in general, there is at least a slight responsibility on me that I take on, you know, not that it's pushed on me, of like helping someone get on the right direction. And so that's, you know, as simple as just like pointing them to the right thing. Like I have a really close friend of mine who the other day just messaged me and was asking about, he's like, I got my benefits. where can I find a psychiatrist kind of thing? And so like, you know, conversation like that, I'm, you know, still one of my best friends. So like would do a lot for this guy, but I know in that kind of situation where my lines are, and I was still able to help him find that. But like if he was going to ask me like, what's your experience like with this counselor and whatever, like I know that I might not go in that. So I think it's, you know, really knowing yourself and knowing like what you're capable of, because at the end of the day, if I'm not comfortable with it and I think it's going to help the person, I try it, it could not only make my situation a lot worse, but it could make that person's situation a lot worse too. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of like knowing yourself in those contexts.
Cool. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it's important to say no one's ever come up to me and been like, I'm struggling, can you help me? Because I know it's more likely that they're sitting silently, unable to take that step forward. And I see my role as someone who's gone through it and had the privilege and the resources to get better is to be vocal about how it's 100% treatable and offer hope and just say, I've been there, it's been ugly, and now I'm on TV. Like, just, there is, if you do the work, we know how to get you better I know it doesn't make any sense and you're confused, but you're smart enough and we know what we're doing. Just trust it, do the work. It can be like 180-degree difference. So like just hope. I think we have a responsibility to like be hopeful. It's not, you don't have to suck. You don't have to just get better, just a little bit better and sort of like go through life, fine. No, you can be super happy and joyful and creative and expressive and nail some pretty serious goals.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? It's okay. Just to kind of close this part off of the conversation, is there any advice that you'd give to someone who's seeking help? Outside of everything else that you've said.
I'll give one really quick thing, and I say it like pretty much every time, is like don't get discouraged when one thing you try doesn't work. Some people view mental health in this very weird way that like, and it's understandable, but it's just such a weird kind of thing of like, I tried it, why didn't it work? There's something wrong with me, I'm gonna give up. But like, I was using the analogy of like barbers, where I'm like, you go get a haircut, you don't like the haircut. Your instinct isn't like, you know what? Forget it. I'm not going to get any more haircuts for the rest of my life. I can deal with it on my own. It's fine. Like, you just go try another barber, And you take some time, but eventually you find that one barber that, like, you get the perfect fade.
It's so tough, man.
Yeah, it's so tough.
So tough.
They give you the right fade. It's a good price. They have a good conversation. Like, everything just works. And you stick with that barber for a long time. And then eventually maybe you're like, you know what? I don't want fade anymore. And, you go get some other kind of cut. But, like, people don't view resources like that, They try. I've so many times I've heard, like, you know what? I tried a psychologist, psychiatry just isn't for me kind of thing. But it's like, no, like that one wasn't for you. Yeah, keep trying. There's helplines that work. There's medication that works. And like, it's a combination of things, It doesn't always have to be just one. Like you got to create your own like cocktail of solutions that you can use. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of like, if you're there and you're struggling with something, like try something and then try something else. And eventually you'll find the thing that works for you.
Awesome. Anyone else like to add?
Yeah. Getting better, or it's not linear. You're not going to like, oh, I'm at the bottom of the barrel and it's not going to be this steady incline. It is a roller coaster. I went in and out of remission, recovery, and recurrence 9 times. Like, that's a crazy journey. And each time you get knocked down, but you have more tools in your toolkit. And like, it's just the way that it happens. It's not linear. It's totally messy and scrambly, but the overall look of it is like the long-term effect of the stock market that we want. Like, it's like up and down, but the larger line is going up at the same time.
One part that I always look at is advocate for yourself. If you feel like something's not right, say it. For me, when I was like in the child and adolescent unit, there was a psychiatrist I was seeing for 2 weeks, and I said, this psychiatrist is not working for me. I'm going to go tell the nurse, hey, I don't like the psychiatrist. Please give me another one. I got another psychiatrist. If you don't like a certain counselor, like you said, there's multiple opportunities to get a new one. And if you don't like a medication, the side effects, if the side effects are more overpowering than it is the solution, then say something. And I think one last thing is just a concept that I follow is, like I said before, take everything one day at a time. If today sucks, there's tomorrow. And if tomorrow sucks, there's another day after that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a great positive spin. All right, moving on to the last portion of this conversation. I think if anyone's open, might do some questions as well. If you guys have any questions for our panel. Let's talk about social responsibility. So I think I mentioned it earlier. It seems like in the last 10 years, mental health becoming at the forefront. You see a lot of artists, athletes, politicians kind of vocally talk about their journeys within mental health. You're starting to see corporations do stuff mental health related. January is a big month for mental health, with Bell Let's Talk taking place next week. It seems that the conversation is becoming greater. It's coming up a lot more. It's being normalized to an extent. Just wanted to get everyone's perspective on this. Like, how do we feel about the increased awareness around mental health, and is it being done in the right way? And anybody can take this.
I can speak to a a few things just about it. I think that like with mental health specifically, so I'll say something first, but it's not my final thing. I think any conversation about it is good. Like I think having Let's Talk, having corporations even tag on, having people, having it be like a cool thing now, or like, you know, LeBron James can be sponsored by Calm or whatever, whereas like 20 years ago, people would be like, wow, LeBron James, like that's soft. I think like that's a good thing, you know, that people are able to do that. That being said, I think it opens up the opportunity for a lot of, well, like, I guess, I don't know, I only call this of like dangerous advocacy. So like, you know, the example I think that is really good is like 13 Reasons Why, the TV show. You know, like first season that came out, great, like people are talking about suicide. It's like, you know, Netflix, I think, like young people, like it's great, but like the way they did it is just in such a like unsafe way, at least like specifically the first season. And like, you know, people like that impacted people. Like that wasn't something where it was just like, oh, well, you know what, like whatever, like we tried a thing, next season will be better. Like, no, these are people's lives that are getting affected by what you're doing. So I think overall, like we should be talking about this more. And I think that I'll take anyone talking about it and trying it out versus not doing it. But also as a corporation, as people, we have judgment, we have the internet, we have experts who've like talked about how to do it in the best way. So like maybe just try to do your research before you come out with like a TV show at least. Like, you know, look it up of like how to talk about suicide. Like, you know, like it's out there, the literature's there, just like really investigate that.
No harm.
Yeah, exactly. But like please like go in that direction when you can. Because like, you know, if you don't start the conversation, especially these big people, you know, people looking up to them, like I'm sure LeBron James talking about it is going to impact a lot of people who look up to him to talk about it too. So
yeah, I'm very happy you brought up the Netflix example because that's the feedback that like the Joker has been getting, right? And the Joker is now nominated for 11 Oscars, and some people that love the movie and think it's beautiful, and there's some people that are like, no, like this is glorifying someone who's had a clear mental health issue and not dealing with it the right way, which is quite fascinating. How obviously in society nowadays everyone's getting woke and trying to be politically correct all the time, but at what point do you separate that? Anyone else? Yes. Kira. Sorry, I keep looking at you.
I had a thought, a little brain fog moment. Sorry.
No, but I feel like you and I. So spoiler alert: me and Kira work together.
Yes, we do. Okay, so
with our friend Sheena sitting in the front.
There's a part of this where I feel that corporations, like we'll talk about work. We'll talk about our work without mentioning. They do an amazing job for the most part. Although if it was a different place, it might feel different. Like I work in a place where there's 70% something women that I work with. The culture is very different there. Like I'm supported in my motherhood journey completely by all of the other mothers that I work around. Like there's no anxiety about that stuff. If I have a really bad day, I can work from home and not put my clothes on for the day. And like there's all these great things, but a lot of corporations have the wrong idea about it. Like it comes from a place of business. So like mental health is a major corporate risk, and that is something that they have to deal with. And so they have these little programs or things that they try and do to put a Band-Aid on something and show that they care or whatever.
It's a strategy.
It is.
It's a business strategy.
And it's not authentic in any way. You can see right through it. But like this is the first job in my life that I've ever had where like as soon as something awful happens, I can go to my boss and tell her, and we have such a close connection. Like when I got my diagnosis, she was one of the first people that I told. Like it's just a different kind of discussion that's happening at our work, and it's like a understanding that no one's coming from a bad place. There's no evil, and there are gravity issues, things in life you just can't control, and it's a firm belief that most of the people I work with share. So it's great.
And to that point, like I think it's quite normal now to take a personal day and you don't have to be sick, like you don't have to be puking, like it's literally hey, I'm just stressed out, gonna take a day off and come back the next day and get things going again. Like I think that's huge progression, like how a lot of companies offer personal days, and like even having a conversation with your boss around, hey, I'm going to take a personal day tomorrow. Like, there's never any questions. It's like, for all I know, they got dry cleaning to do, and they just have to get it done, right? So
they're completely trusting. So
Yeah.
it changes all of the conversations. You don't have any guilt or shame for not being able to get ready that day.
Yeah.
Or, like being embarrassed that you didn't get a wink of sleep last night and you look like dirt and like
Yeah.
you smell like dirt and you're just not going in. It's not happening.
how does everyone feel about January being considered the most depressing month of the year? Like, is that true? Like,
Ask me in February.
okay.
Jeez.
No, like, I'm just wondering because everyone's like, oh, it's when the bills kick in, and it's when, everyone's sad because it's cold outside, and then, there's Blue Monday that just took place recently, and then there's Bell Let's Talk at the end of the month. Like, there's so much around January positioned as the worst month of the year, and how do you overcome it? That, like, I almost think about the people that don't look at January as being a negative month, and they're like, hey, this is a new year. Like, I want to get things going. I want to be motivated. It's how much of that notion is potentially bringing them down. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just an open conversation on this.
Brains have an amazing ability to take anything and make it negative. Like, I used to never see the point. Like, why would I go on a vacation? Like, I'm taking my negative brain with me there. Like, why is, a beach going to make me any happier? And then I realized, you have to change your thoughts, and then you get to engage with the world a different way. So you make a very valid point that, like, if someone's being curmudgeon-y about January, like, the neural pathways that you are practicing in your mind are more negative, are more depressed. That's not serving you in the long run. So it's like, okay, how can we shift that? How can we see the positive in something? Because every thought is wanting to make a pattern in your head.
Yeah. Anybody else? Thoughts on January?
I could even argue like December is tough too. For a lot of people.
It is.
Oh, family.
Yeah.
Was it? I feel like Noyz, like, on your Twitter, you retweeted something about, or I think you'd shared it online about someone's, like, during Christmas time. I think it had to do with, think about the people that don't make ends meet during this time, or don't have a family to go to. Like,
look, I see it at work, for example. Like a lot of people that I work with, clients that I work with, they're disconnected from their families, or they've had bad breakups, things like that, or they lost a family member, lost a sibling. So the holidays can be very difficult to get through. So that's kind of like counterpoint. So December can be tougher than January. I'd say. Yeah.
People are always suffering. Like, they're also every single month.
Like, February 1st rolls around, it's like, oh, things are great.
Full switch.
Every day it's like, best day ever.
No,
Best day ever.
Seriously. Just to kind of close this out, because I want to see if there's any questions in the audience. Has there been, like, a person's journey that's inspired you? Like, I know with this wave around mental health being more in the media, has there been an athlete, an artist, a singer, someone that you've seen or you've known that they've overcome a lot and you've been inspired by their journey?
Two people come to mind really quickly for me. One was very mental health related because he's our executive director, and the other one is Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I'll talk about Eric first, kind of founder of Jack.org. Jack.org was founded through kind of like a tragedy, and being able to turn that into something where, every day he's able to kind of come in and recognize that, like, that happened 10 years ago, but this is where we are now, and kind of looking to the future. I think, like, sometimes I don't think about it enough, and then I do, and it kind of hits me as, like, that's huge.
He lost his son.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right.
So, it's a really big thing, I think. And then Arnold, I think, is not at all mental health related, but I just kind of get inspired by going back to that kind of notion of hope of, like, I think people have various thoughts on him of, like, is he a good family man? But I mean, as just like a person being able to come from, a country, coming to America at a time where people definitely weren't accepting not only of immigrants, but also of what his field was of, like, bodybuilding. It was a very weird thing, and coming and not having any money and then being able to eventually become the person that he was, I think required a lot of hope and resilience. And, I'm not sure how open of a mental health advocate he is, but absolutely, there's no way that journey doesn't cause you some kind of mental health stress and some kind of whether it be anguish, depression, whatever it is, and to get to the point he did, I think requires a huge amount of mental fortitude. And I think that, both those people, I think, have been able to go through a lot and still get to points that they are. And I think that that's incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger, because when you think about Arnold, you think of the most buff guy.
Yeah.
Like Terminator.
Yeah.
This guy's fearless.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't, like, he can literally... Thank you, Lindsay. He can, like, nothing phases him.
Yeah. But I mean, absolutely. He had to, like, there's no way that journey was a flawless journey. I mean, like, I have read into it a bit, and like I know that he talks about it to some degree of like the struggles he went through and things that he faced. And like I think that it's important to look at people's journeys not just for the successes, but like all the barriers that they had. I mean, Arnold, I think, didn't really start. Like I think he came to went to the States when he was like early 20s, and I think he only really started like becoming the celebrity that he was at like age like 28, 29. Until that point, he was like, I think, a roofer or something, doing construction work. So like that, being able to kind of push through that with this end vision in mind, I think, to me at least, demonstrates a lot about hope and overcoming things, especially when it comes to just really having a vision and focusing on your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
For me, it's someone named Kevin Hines. He's also a mental health advocate. He jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived, and ever since then, he's been sharing his story on. He's diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he's been sharing his story on multiple medications, treatments, hospital visits, and I think, for me personally, hearing people's stories is what gets me going, because it's living proof that you're going to be okay. Another person I would say is Demi Lovato. She's big out there with her music and everything like that. So I think her being such a big person, a big influence, and for young teenagers who also have mental health problems, it's also amazing as well. Yeah.
A really dope quote, which kind of goes in line with what you're saying about the founder of Jack.org. So I just read this yesterday. It was from Andrew Solomon, who's got a lot of really great TED Talks about experiencing depression. He says pain needs to be transformed, but not forgotten. Mm-hmm. And so I find I connect a lot with artists that are very open with their mental health and have taken that pain and that darkness and translated into something beautiful. So whether that's like Earl Sweatshirt, Pharoah Monch, Haley Williams, like so many different artists that take something that could be very negative and could be very harmful or life-threatening and channel it and transform it into something that is beautiful and that other people can connect with. I have a lot of just admiration for artists that are just open and honest and raw with what they present.
Yeah, I just to add to that, like one thing that really resonated with me was when DeMar DeRozan started to be open about his mental health, and then Kevin Love. Like, these are basketball players. Yeah. Everyone knows how tough it is to be in a male-driven sport, and to see social media like call you out when you have a bad game. Like I remember, I think it was the last year, and he didn't address it, but when Kyle Lowry scored 0 points for a playoff game, and people were hazing him online of, Kyle Lowry's an all-star, and you see all these memes. Yeah. I was just like, dude, like, I would hate to be Kyle, like, to go on Twitter and just see your legacy just summed up in 140 characters, or 280 now, because they increased it. But, like, I thought that was very powerful when, like, DeMar actually stood out and actually said, hey, I'm going through stuff.
And even, like, the outpouring of support that came up around him and said, hey, we got your back, whatever we can do to, fans put together packages and letters, and they sent it to him, just encouraging him and supporting him. And I think that was beautiful how the community came together around that.
Yeah, I think one of the moments that kind of sucked recently was listening to the new McNeill album and just hearing how much he was struggling a little bit. Yeah. And unfortunately, we all know how that story ended. But then you could see like he was using his art as a way to try to cope. Yeah. But I think mixing in the art's very. Yeah, very good. What was that?
Amongst other things.
Yeah, amongst other things for sure. Yeah.
Another name I want to throw out there too, Mauro Ranallo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just recently saw his documentary.
Bipolar Rock and Roller.
Bipolar Rock and Roller. Yeah, really, really dope, and just again, it was very raw, and it just showed his journey, the struggles that he had when he, fell apart and was at the ledge, but then at the same time when he was at his peak with his family, with his creativity, with his career, and yeah, just the end of it was just as kind of was like the take-home theme that everyone's been talking about today, is just have that hope and hold on to it. And that documentary hit me hard. Yeah.
Just to Lindsay.
Yeah, I have to say something. No, it's okay. So yes, it's really great to like see famous people admit to having their mental health struggles, and this is something I'm reconciling too, because yeah, I've had mental health struggles, and I've also had an extraordinary amount of privilege. And I know I'm friends with women who have less privilege than I do. And their struggles are even harder than mine, you know? So it's so great, but it's so much harder for those who have less privilege than, you know, these people with a lot more resources. And it's still a new thought to me, and I'm still reconciling it and washing it around a little bit. But like, if it was bad for me, and drove me to a point where I didn't want to live, like, I had a lot to work with. It wasn't bad.
Yeah.
And my mind made it terrible. So I have this practice of like, I'm driving in my car and I pass bus stops, and I see people at the bus stop, and I've got my car and I've got my heat on, and I get to go and come when I want. And then there's people who are hustling and getting to the bus and getting their kids on the bus. And I'm just like, holy shit, those are the friggin' heroes of mental health. They have more stress. They have less privilege. They have fewer resources than I do. And, it's so that I don't know how to polish it up.
I had a thought on the way here. I was just thinking about, you know, the intersection between access to mental health support and class.
Yeah.
And
my God.
Yeah, just it's not cheap.
No.
You know, to get support.
Oh yeah.
And you know the intersection between, you know, access and class and race and immigration and how it all plays together.
Yeah, and that's been like, especially when you think about the violence in our communities, and you think of like, I've had the opportunity to, you know, work with football players who do a lot of outreach like in different communities, and for them it's like they see these situations, like they're the ones going to you know, low income housing and talking to people that literally may not see tomorrow, right? And they're trying to get them help, they're trying to get them on a right path, but it's tough because they don't know. Like, as much as you tell them, hey, go, you know, if you have an OHIP card, you can go to get a referral from a doctor. These people might not even
Oh my gosh.
Might not have ever seen a doctor.
When
right?
there's no food in your belly or heat, like that is not that's not the fire you need to put out right now, right? Like
no basic needs covered means no hope.
We are among the privileged. We have suffered, you know, but holy cow, there's a lot more silent suffering that's going on to those who are less fortunate.
Well, that's actually a good segue to our last question. Then we'll open it up to the audience in case anybody wants to ask a question to the panel or just wants to share, because this is an open environment. What should be people's social responsibility when it comes to mental health?
People as in like all of us everyday folk?
Every day, it can be just like, what do you think should be the social responsibility for people when it comes to mental health?
I mean, I think education's one thing. Like, I think there's, you know, we live in a day and age where Google exists, and there's quite a bit of good information out there. So I think, you know, educate yourself on it. I don't like putting responsibility on people necessarily, because I feel bad of like, you have to do this, but also like, you know, we weren't taught it in school, and we know it's important. So take some time, read what the signs are, read how to support someone. But on top of that, I think, like, you know, I don't think anyone's asking anyone to go become a counselor or go become a psychiatrist or, you know, a first responder. Like, you know, it's great if you do those things, but I think the most impactful thing you could do as a person is really learn to take care of yourself. You know, whether that's I'm not going to let that thing that's bothering me, that's a very small thing, turn into a much bigger thing. You know, if everyone went and dealt with the thing while it was small, we wouldn't have massive wait lines for counselors, and we wouldn't have this huge need of people who don't have support, because we'd be able to kind of not necessarily help ourselves, but make ourselves a priority. And so, I mean, it sounds dumb to say that, hey, your responsibility is to take care of yourself, but like, I think some people don't do that. Some people don't view mental health as something that they need to concern themselves with every day. And I think we should. I think that if there's one thing you can do, it's take care of yourself. Plenty of things you could do beyond that, but at the very least, start taking care of yourself, and
You can control that.
You can control that at least, exactly. To a certain degree, take care of yourself where you can.
Amazing. Anybody else?
I'll say something. I went to a bias workshop a couple months ago with work, actually. It was amazing morning that I had. And my biggest takeaway from it was this woman, she said, the golden rule is the rule that everyone's so familiar with. And really, the problem with the golden rule is that to treat others the way you want to be treated, it is kind of backwards and takes away any authenticity from relationships that you could build with people, even in a minute or two. And I think one of the biggest things you could do is just take real moments in your life to learn more about the people around you and to treat them the way that they want to be treated. That I feel like is a really big thing that you could do. And honestly, just remembering that, like, every person you meet, they have something going on in their own head. They have lives happening, and if they said something that pissed you off or whatever, it probably wasn't because they wanted to piss you off. Like, everyone has their own to deal with, and just keep that in mind.
And admittedly, I actually had a moment like that where I was in an interaction where I felt like I was out of line and something else was bothering me, but I think I took it out on somebody, and I wrote them an email. Like, I was like, hey, sorry, like, it's not anything to do with you. It's just, things have been kind of crap this week. So, we'll do better next time. Right.
Something that I think everyone should think about more is, and it's a total extension from your point, but recognize that everybody you bump into, give them grace and assume that they are doing the best with what they've got in that moment. It might be shitty, like if you're grumpy at somebody, like, just fill it with grace. Fill it with like, oh, I've been there. They're doing the best that they can. It's a little bit bad. And don't let it fire you up, because you're just increasing the amount of negativity and grumpiness that we're passing around. So that's something that serves me well. And then I don't take it personally. I'm like, oh man, they are doing the best they can. And if that's as good as it is, things are hard for them right now. So that helps.
Cardi?
I think for me, like, going back to that, like, you'd never know what someone's going through in the moment and how they may lash out at you. But I've realized with, like, family matters and, like, family members getting mad at me, majority of the time, I can't change the person. I can only change myself. I can only change my reaction. For example, if someone has an addiction, you can help them all you want, and any other mental health problem, but if they don't put the step forward to actually ask for help themselves, there's not much you can do. So I think what you can do best is just change how your reaction is. You can't control the stuff that happens to you, but you can control your reaction at the end of the day.
Noyz. Sorry to put you on the spot. But everyone else said something.
The thing that's kind of coming to mind, and of course I would pick a hip hop example, but Royce the 5'9" put out a song called Strong Friend, and it talks to the experience that we all have. Everybody has somebody in their lives that is, that picture of strength. They don't ever seem to need support with anything. They always seem to be able to handle whatever life throws at them. But the song basically says that's the person that is probably dealing with something that they're not telling you.
So true.
Yes.
Overachievers.
Awesome. So I guess our responsibility, we all know somebody like that, or maybe you are somebody that is the strong friend. But reach out to that person and just have a real conversation with them and see if they're good.
Cool.
Yeah.
This concludes like this portion of it. Is there any questions in the audience? Any thoughts? Like,
a few of you have talked about like people close to you, siblings, families, spouses who support you. Are a resource to you? To those people who live or they're close to people as someone who's struggling with mental health, how would you give? What advice would you give them to be more of a resource and less of a restriction, and also how to deal with things sometimes, because it can be very difficult on, like, not to be in the self-care, but on their mental health as well, because they want to be there, they want to be that person, but at times it's also difficult to be the resource and not a restriction to the upward trend that you might be having.
yeah, just to recap for the audio recording. So, question around what kind of feedback would you give someone who wants to support but they don't know how?
Well, like as your spouse.
It's a bystander.
As the person closest, because that tends to be the person you're around the most. That tends to be the person that can get things inflicted on them the most.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Also inflict with little things
Yep.
onto the other person who's struggling the most too, right?
Yeah.
Because the closest person to you, one small thing like you were saying about a seed, can really grow a lot faster than some random individual.
Totally.
on the road.
Yep.
So what would you give advice to those people, the spouses, the family members, the siblings, the best friends who are closest to you, to be a resource and not a restriction, and, you know?
Not an aggravator, right?
Yes, and also how for them to not fall into it themselves, almost. You know?
I would say personally for me, just be there for the person. Just be present. For example, my dad went through depression for a long time. And even someone who's been through depression herself, I didn't know what to do in the situation. I just wanted him to stop feeling that way, and I felt so helpless. But all I did was I just laid beside him, and he cried, but that's okay. He just knew somebody was with them. Yeah.
This is probably one of the only questions I'll ever feel like truly capable of answering, as my job title is the Be There Coordinator. So if there's one thing I should know, it's how to be there.
Now's the time to talk about that program.
Sorry, I've waited my whole life for this. But what I do have to say isn't as like step 1, step 2, step 3, because I think, you know, being there for someone can look like so many different things. I'll really quickly just talk about like what I guess our Be There is, because that's a pretty good model. It's like 5 steps. Versus saying what you see, showing that you care is the second thing. So what that means is saying like what you're noticing. So not saying what you're assuming, but just straight up like, hey, I noticed that you're sleeping in a lot. Hey, I noticed that, whatever. Sticking to the facts so you don't hurt their feelings. Showing that you care. So reminding them why you're saying that. It's not like I'm saying that you're sleeping in because it's bothering me, or I'm saying that you're sleeping in because I think something's wrong with you. It's that, I care about you and I want you to be better. Next is hearing them out. So this is the one where I think a lot of people mess up, is that and I've done this, I'm not accusing anyone else of it. So many times a friend will start talking to me and I'll be like, you know what, man, I'm in your same shoes. Like I did that exact same thing, and like I felt this and I felt that, and you assume so much about what that person's going through. But I think part of actually hearing that person out and showing you care is really just letting that person kind of talk and asking them, what do you want me to do? I think is a huge thing of like, not only in this moment, but generally. Like I know that, for example, I've been able to have some conversations with people where I know that if they're stressed out, they want me to just sit there and listen, but then also do the dishes is like one of the things. Yeah. Or like there's other times where it's like, I want you to distract me and put on a movie or something, but it's going to look so different for everyone. I think it's a matter of like having those conversations to really know that person. The next thing, which kind of is talking about what you said, like of how you not get into that, is, you know, the 4th rule is knowing your role. And I think it's important to recognize, like, you know, again, like we said, we're not experts in taking care of someone. We have to know where to draw those lines, and it's so difficult, especially like I've had to communicate this to parents a lot, which is like, you love your kid, you want the best for them, but there's times where you're not going to be able to be that person that they need. But that leads you to the 5th rule, which is connecting them to help. So getting them to someone who can get them the actual help that they need. So to boil it down, I would say just really asking that person what is going to work best for them, really listening to them when they're saying that and actually respecting that, because it's one thing to ask it and it's another thing to do it, and then trying to make sure that person has someone else to talk to actually get better. And it's not a one-day thing. It's a very long-term thing, I feel, at least, but it does get you on the right direction. And, you know, like Lindsay said before, it's not going to be a perfect like upward slope. It's going to be times where it's not going to work well, but generally it'll move up.
Anybody else?
No, I think you knocked it out of the park, man.
I get paid the big bucks for this.
Any got time for 2 more questions? Yes.
Do you have anyone in your life who, when you first told them about your mental health, they completely didn't understand it, but now they do?
Good
How do you
question.
get them from one side of the spectrum to the other?
Yeah, I think the person that I told that didn't get it at all was probably my dad. Because depression is, he was of the mindset, or his understanding of it was that there had to be something external that caused it. You know, it couldn't just be like a brain thing. There had to be something that happened, right? So I guess the hardest thing was getting him to understand that, you know, there was no trigger. There was nothing that happened that led to the depression. It just kind of happened. Because, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about, you know, in ethnic households, how we perceive and how we talk about mental health. From his perspective, his mindset was, okay, we came to Canada, we worked hard to give you everything that you could possibly need, and now you have all those things, so, you know, why are you still depressed? Kind of like framed it in a sense of, almost like,
Why are you doing this to me?
yeah, like how are you?
You have no
ungrateful?
right.
Yeah,
There's no reason for this to be happening.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Like, we knew hardship.
yeah, exactly.
So-
That's exactly how he perceived it, because his circumstance was so different in that, like, he grew up in a house. He grew up basically in a house made out of mud with no electricity, right? So between one generation to the next, that's a huge transition and transformation. So he just looked at it in terms of circumstance and said, okay, my circumstance was this, yours is this.
There's no room for this.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know if he's fully all the way around yet, but I feel like he is starting to understand more. And I think part of it just comes from having those conversations and breaking down this vocabulary in ways that he can understand. You know, he might not know what anxiety is or what depression is, but if you say, hey, you know, this is how I'm feeling today, he'll understand it in those terms.
Sorry, have you done
Yeah.
anything outside of those conversations? Like actually shown him like videos or like sent him articles or like to help him on that front?
I haven't. That's a good idea, though.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sparked an idea.
Also,
Yeah.
it's easy to. It's not your responsibility to teach somebody else to validate your experience, right? Like, I would ask, like, why is it so important, like, that person understands? Maybe it's harmful to you and stuff, but at some point, it's like, you gotta create some distance. That's the last thing that someone with a mental health issue needs to be doing is trying to convince someone that it's legitimate. Like, no, that is aggravating the disease, and it's wasted energy. And leave that to them. You can't force people to be interested and learn something. Like, that's on them.
One last question, Shreya.
There's a habit to talk about mental health struggle stories and combine it with like this amazing conclusion that was like, oh, but then look at them. They founded a company, they're the president, they're Beyonce, and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And I just wonder if you think that there's like, even in those stories, there's like an air of intolerance, because it's like you can only struggle if you then turn around and make it 100 billion times better. Like I had to take a breather from the mental health advocacy space after I became public about my experiences, because it was like, first I felt very welcome in the communities. I was like, oh wow, people are accepting of the fact that I struggle with my mental health. But then it was like, everyone else seems to be high performance people struggling with things, and I'm like a vegetable, and I'm not accomplishing things, and they're all going to Harvard, and it's like, I guess I suck at depression too.
Right.
Like,
I don't mean to laugh, but that's
no.
It's funny. Yeah, it's.
Yeah. So what do you think of it? Do you feel that pressure to just always be like on this upward trajectory because you've like said that I struggle with this thing, or how do you navigate that?
I think for me, I think it puts up a front that sometimes you show people you're okay, but you're not. For example, I'm a student at Waterloo, an amazing university, and people think I'm doing well in my life. I've went through many relapses, many hospitalizations, and I've explained my recovery. but there's still room for me to relapse. If I relapse, I can tell myself that's okay. I can get better again. So I think putting up a front saying, yeah, they're high functioning and they're powerful and all such those areas, but you never know, they might be just putting up a front, a story, because I know I do that a lot because I'm expected to never be sick again. So, yeah.
I think I can speak to this, and I'm like, because things are going pretty well for me right now, and like, stay tuned. Like, I can expect and even look forward to the fact that like, life is going to throw me something that is going to knock me off my feet. And I expect and I hope that I have the integrity to be open about it, and just say, yep, this is happening again. And of course it is, right? That's almost like the next frontier, right? That's how we take, we don't, my life is not a movie. Our lives aren't movies with happy endings, right? Like, it's 16 movies with 16 happy endings and 16 crises, right? And we're going to keep doing like 17 trilogies, right?
Or like Bandersnatch with...
Yeah, so stay tuned. That will be the evolution of what it means to have mental health, to get better, and then to relapse. And then as a culture, we'll become more nuanced and more understanding of it, and that's cool progress to make when the time comes.
Such a, like, just a random comment to the question you brought, Shreya. Like, it's such a... It's like the result of just a social media generation that we live in. Unfortunately, I find that everyone likes a good turnaround story, but then I find that like the ones that get highlighted are the ones where, you know, this person went off to this person made the next Facebook and made $1 million. Like, no one, it's very hard for someone to acknowledge the small wins of just, you know, putting yourself out there and doing your first talk about stuff that you're dealing with. And I think that's just a whole other topic for the show. Social media fronting, but yeah.
I just wanted to add to this. So I have a social media account where I share my struggles, but I mainly share my triumphs and my recoveries. And my friend who's in the audience right now, she asked me the other day, what's happening with your social media account? And I told her I don't really post when I'm struggling. So I think that's one thing I have to be open about, because it happens. It does happen at the end of the day.
Oh, you could start something, actually. Like, you know, when it's like a door shut and you need to hang that do not disturb sign.
Yes.
Like, I'm working on stuff right now. Like, you could just be like, I don't know. That's an opportunity to just be like, I'm not on here because I'm not doing well, but I'll be back. You know, like, stay tuned.
Good idea.
And I think one of the dangers of, you know, mental health kind of being in the spotlight as a discussion piece is that, at least from my experience, I've come across a lot of people that promise a lot of dangerous things. Like, they'll say, I can cure your depression, or this book will change your life. And it's like, you cannot promise that. And I think that kind of goes into the whole, at least partially, it kind of ties into the social media thing, where it's like, people want just that quick fix, that quick answer. And, you know, mental health, it's a lifelong thing. Every day, it's everyday maintenance, it's everyday practice.
Totally.
Yes. And I think that's what people tend to overlook. And it's like, okay, you talk to a therapist, so you're good now, right? It's like, no, I'm going to need this for a very long time.
Yeah. Honestly, don't believe the hype.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think you just follow your own journey and seek the help that you need. It's getting kind of late, and I know people want to probably hit the bar, so I want to thank my amazing panelists for joining us. Then we'll just do a quick roundtable, just let the audience know where they can connect with you if they want to connect, have a conversation, or just kind of follow the amazing work that you're doing. Like, what's awesome about everyone on this table, I'm not talking about myself, is that they're all working on amazing things, whether it's in the space or outside of the space. You know, Amrita, an amazing hip hop artist. Lindsay's on City Line every now and then, which is awesome. Cheyenne's a great speaker, and Karen Deep's awesome with her Instagram account, and Kira's always designing something cool. So tell the audience and people listening at home how they can connect with you.
I guess I'm on social media, Noyz hip hop. Check out the website as well, noyzhiphop.com. Always posting new events, so next mental health workshop and things like that. So if you want to connect, check out the website, check out social media.
You can look up my name, Kira McNeill, on LinkedIn, or you can check me out on Instagram or Facebook, all public. And also snoop up, well, I guess I can't say where I work for, so you have to guess that.
I'm gonna have to cut
really
it out.
Awesome social media. Oh, yeah, you are going to have to cut it out.
That's fine.
Sorry.
This is, again, another one time I'm really lucky that my name is kind of unique. It's better than in elementary school. My name's Cheyenne, Shayan. Last name Yzdanpanah. Yazdanpanah. Check me out. If you Google me, you'll be able to find everything. There's not a lot of other people with that last name or first name. My social media handles are all Cheyenne Yaz. Pretty short and sweet. I like it. But also Jack.org, just because I have to give them the shout out. They're pretty much on all social media stuff, so definitely check them out, and definitely go to bethere.org in case I didn't even say the website. Lots of cool stuff there, and you'll find my picture and video somewhere there too. Yeah.
Awesome.
Right on. You can find me on Instagram, and from there you can find me on anything else. So at Lindsay Whisen, that's my personal account. And then if you want to follow it, my organizing company, it's at Ease Up Organizing.
So you can find me on my personal Instagram account, Karen Deep Gill. I'll spell it out for you. KaranDeep, Gill, Gill. Or you can find me at my social media mental health advocacy account, which is at Living in Peace, peace with 2 E's at the end, _
Cool. Awesome. And if you want to connect with me, it's at Nav Nanwa on Instagram, at @nnanwa on Twitter, at New Theory Radio across the board. Big thanks to everyone here for spending your Friday with us. I want to do a group photo at the end because I think this is the first time we did a live show, and
every seat is full.
Yes, I'm very proud. I thought no one was going to come. It's risky to do this, and again, thank you so much. I know apparently the weather isn't the best right now, so thank you so much for coming out. And big thank you to my photographer, my brother, McNeill at Colorblind Photography _ He got stickers made, so feel free to use them. Big shout outs to my techie, Thumb and Atwell. Go listen to her show each and every Saturday from 5 to 7 called The Element with her co-host Gurjot. They're always talking about something cool and something controversial and like to stir the pot. So go check them out on Sauga 960 AM. Special thanks to obviously Sauga 960 AM for allowing us to do this. We have a lot of water, pop, and snacks left, so please take some home. I'm totally okay with it. And you will hear all of us next time. Thank you.